If we ask ourselves who the greatest chess player of all time has been, two names will probably come to mind: Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov. If we have to choose which of the two to study to improve our level, for my personal taste, I prefer to study the games of Garry Kasparov. Why? Because now with the engines, it's very complicated to understand the games of these super grandmasters. We can learn much more from the games of the grandmasters from years ago. So today I'm bringing you a game by Garry Kasparov that is probably one of the best he's played in his life. But not because it was spectacular, like he gave away the queen and all that. No, no, no. But because we take away some lessons that, as always, will be very useful for us to understand chess a little better and, of course, improve when it comes to playing our own games. In this game, he faced off against one of his strongest rivals, Alexei Shirov, in the year 1994. Shirov played the well-known Sicilian defense today, okay? And Kasparov opted for the open line, as you will see next. Knight f3, e6, d4. This is called the open line of the Sicilian. As always, I'm going through this a bit faster because it's theory we've already studied on many occasions. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn, knight f6, attacking the e4 square, and knight c6, defending it. This opening, now after knight c6, this Sicilian defense is known as the Pelican Sicilian. Not yet, but because of what we're about to get into, let me explain. What problem do the black pieces have? And what Kasparov detects very well here, he realizes that there is a very weak square, and this square is the d6 square. How can we detect a weak square, Chessteacher? Well, it's that square that cannot be defended by the pawns, okay? As you can see, the ka pawn is no longer there, so it will never defend it, and the e pawn has advanced, so no pawn can be placed to threaten the d6 square. It's even weaker if they have a pawn behind the square, okay? We've detected a weak square, so Kasparov doesn't think twice, and with this knight b5, what he's doing is penetrating with the knight and the queen on the d6 square. Therefore, he forces the player with the black pieces to play this move here, d6. Is all this clear? Perfect. All of this is theory, okay? Bishop f4 is threatening the d6 square again, and now, of course, we enter the pelican with the move e5. This e5 must be played no matter what. Why? Because the d6 square is being attacked by too many pieces. Therefore, we've now lost a tempo with the bishop because we're going to have to move it, but our opponent has also lost a tempo because he first played e6 and then e5. Something they could have done in one move, they've done in two, just like we did with the bishop. Very well. Now, all of this is theory, so I won't go through it too slowly, okay? Instead, let's get to the main idea. a6 threatens the knight, there's no choice but knight to a3. And now b5, we clearly see they're threatening b4 to win one of our two knights, so we're right to move it away. Knight to d5. Pros and cons of the position. Come on, we've reached a point where several moves have passed, and we need to start understanding what's happening here. As a very strong pro, we have this d5 square, which is once again an extremely weak square, and we've managed to place a knight there. Also, as a pro, we have this threat, which, well, it's true, it can be easily neutralized with bishop to e7, which is actually what happened in the game, right? And really, it's no big deal. The good thing about the Sicilian for the black pieces, and this works against us, is that if we can't capitalize on the space advantage we have now, the dynamic advantage, in the long run, black might achieve a better structure for an endgame, okay? This is what makes the Sicilian defense so powerful. How can we continue here? Would it be a good idea to eliminate one of the bishops with knight takes e7, winning the bishop pair? Well, many of you intermediate level players might probably think so, right? We eliminate a bishop, we eliminate the bishop pair with our knight. The difference here is that if we were to capture this bishop, they would recapture it with the knight. And now these two knights would be pressuring the d5 point along with the pawn, and there would easily be, right, the solution to black's problem, which is getting rid of the weakness they had on d5. And then after pawn takes, the knight could come through here, and this would be a great help for the black pieces. Therefore, it's clear that we don't want to capture this bishop here just yet. That said, it wouldn't be a bad idea at all to capture this knight with the bishop. We're eliminating one of the most important defenders in exchange for the bishop pair. You'll see why this is so important. Bishop takes. Logically, we don't want to capture this bishop again because our knight is much more important, and so we must think about how to proceed. The point is that there are many moves available here, okay? We could play, for example, g3 to fianchetto our bishop. It would be possible, although I don't like it very much. We could play, for example, bishop to e2, any move, but there's one move that's played a lot here, which is this one, the one Kasparov played, c3, with very interesting ideas. First, it blocks the semi-open file of the black pieces. It's important that when we have a semi-open file, we must understand that the real stars in those types of files are the rooks, because they thrive there. They could attack the point on c2, but now on c3, as you can see, being a spearhead, it cannot be attacked from the front in any way. We are also preventing any kind of advance on b4. We are helping the queen if she wants to be able to come out through b3, and we are also helping the knight to be able to recycle via c2. You see what a multi-purpose move c3 is? If we start to understand how to read the position well, we will find moves that hadn't even crossed our minds. Bishop b7, excuse me. And here, well, we would really have many options again, really. We could develop the bishop, but Kasparov plays knight c2, a very good option, so that we can head to e3 in the future while defending the knight on d5, which is a very strong knight. And for now, that's what we want to keep, right? That beast of a knight. The pros here will already understand Shirov's move, but probably all those who aren't as good or haven't been in chess for long will find it hard to understand this move. By Shirov, who pulls the knight back and places it back on its original square. Knight bait. How can that be, Chessteacher? Well, alright. Here Shirov is doing two things. Giving the bishop a clear path to pressure the knight, this very strong knight we have on d5, and he's also giving this knight another route. He wants to come through d7, and who knows if to b6 or c5. But this knight from here is now transforming. You already know that knights are excellent at maneuvering and will be able to come out wherever he feels like. Very well. If you've been paying attention to the latest videos on the channel, you'll have understood the principles of the double weakness. And this will start to sound familiar. That's why, if we study, not all, but most of the videos we upload, we can draw many conclusions and improve much more. In this case, which weakness should we attack? Logically, the weakness on d6 because it's the backward pawn. Fixed thanks to our pawn on e4 and thanks to our knight on d5, which is in an advanced post. And we already know that when we have a weakness, we must look for the principle of the second weakness. And you will also then understand the move a4, which we also saw with the black pieces a couple of days ago on the channel. The idea is that here, if we capture after a times b5, this pawn on b5 would now be captured. Therefore, we threaten to win a pawn. And no matter how much they defend it, this pawn will still be a target for attack, and therefore also a weakness. If we manage to get black to have two weaknesses, our game will be much easier to win. So logically, what Shirov does is capture the pawn himself before that weakness is created. It makes sense, right? Logically, well, rook takes a4, the pawn is recovered. It's true that rook isn't very well placed, but you'll see the fantastic maneuver of that rook, which makes Garry Kasparov, logically, understand chess like no one else. You'll see it, because it's gonna fascinate you. Knight d7, it can go to b6 or c5, and in both squares it would attack the rook. And so, what does Kasparov do? Rook d4. Normally, a rook is widely considered to be worth 5 points, right? And on the other hand, a bishop or a knight are worth 3 points. But what happens? Well, a rook is worth 5 points at the end of the game. This is important for you now, because at the beginning of the game, what's worth more? Hear me out, this knight or this rook? Without a doubt, this knight is worth much more, maybe 4 points, and this rook is worth 1 point because it's doing absolutely nothing. In other words, the value of the pieces is relative. Therefore, pay attention to what Kasparov did here. He's threatening the bishop, and Shirov defends it with knight c5. And without anything attacking it, he gives away his rook for the bishop. Rook takes b7. Pay attention. In chess, this is called an exchange sacrifice, because we're sacrificing a rook worth 5 points for a bishop worth 3 points. This is an exchange sacrifice. But, as we were saying, that bishop at the beginning of the game was worth much more than a rook. We've brought a rook that was here doing nothing. A rook that was here doing nothing. It was probably worth 1 or 2 points, and we've exchanged it for a very strong bishop. Therefore, in this position, Kasparov has an extremely strong position, thanks to the dynamism of his pieces. Before, this is a very interesting move that you can always take advantage of when you want to block a knight. This is called making an umbrella for it. Look at how many things we learn in a single game, huh? That's why it's interesting for you to watch all the ones we upload to the channel, or as many as you can, or whichever ones you feel like, right? To keep learning a lot of patterns. The difference between us and the best in the world is that they know many more patterns, I assure you. The idea is that this umbrella we're making means the knight can't jump anywhere, and we achieve this whenever we place a pawn 2 squares away from a knight. So we're trying to punish the opponent's pieces, which are obviously much worse than ours. In this case, even though we're down in exchange, let's think about one thing. For the more professional ones, I'll tell you this. Normally, when a position you're up in exchange, let's assume we're black. We want to trade pieces to reach an endgame where the rooks grow, right? And are worth 5 points, and our opponent doesn't have them in this case, right? But what happens? Well, imagine if black manages to trade this bishop for this knight, something that could be completely normal. In fact, in this position, they play bishop g5 for what? So that if white comes with knight e3, the bishop can be exchanged for the knight. Well, that would be good for black. Imagine they exchange this for this and this for this. At first glance, this would be fabulous for black, right? Yes, but we could embed this bishop on the d5 square, and no one could drive this bishop away because it would be defended by a pawn and would be an outpost. When only rooks are left, it's impossible to drive out. So this monster bishop that covers the whole board would be worth as much or more than a rook. So watch out, because Kasparov understands chess like nobody else. Instead of knight e3, knight a3 to avoid trading that knight for the bishop. The more pieces there are on the board, the better it is for white. He decides to castle kingside, and now the knight moves to c4. Notice how the knights are starting to position themselves in a super powerful way, while the opponent's rooks still aren't doing anything at all. Shirov tries to break free with a 5. It's not a bad move if we were to capture now. If we capture that pawn with the a5 pawn, this would be very bad, because knight takes would follow, probably knight takes and queen takes, for example. This pawn would still be extremely weak, we wouldn't be castled, and we'd still have to bring out the bishop and castle. It wouldn't be a good idea to capture this pawn. We prefer to optimize development, and castle, it's important. Even if Kasparov has made many maneuvers here and hasn't castled yet, it doesn't mean he won't want a castle, you know? He's had more important things to do, and for now, since the king can't be attacked, he's put it on hold for a bit. Pawn takes pawn. What do we capture with? With the pawn or with the knight? Well, obviously, we should capture with the pawn, because if we capture with the knight, we're unblocking our opponent's knight on b7. If we capture with the pawn, we set up the umbrella again, and this knight is immobile once more because it can't get out of here. Do you see how well this umbrella pattern will work for you? Let's say in your games if you know it. It really does. Here Shirov makes an inaccuracy. Let me explain it to you. What is the correct plan here for the black pieces? Very easy to say now that we've studied the game, of course, obviously, right? Logically, I've used engines to understand the plan well. It doesn't mean I'm a better player than Shirov. I guess that's more than clear, right? The correct idea here for the black pieces was to play rook a2 immediately, placing it on the 7th rank. And when the white king castled, the queen would go through c8, then come to e6, and then probably go to h6, thus coming to directly attack the opponent's king. Logically, this plan is not easy at all to find. And Shirov plays a quite human move too, which is queen b8. Although it might seem like this queen isn't doing anything, what it's doing is providing an attack on the point. It protects the square of b4 when this knight leaves, and it also lets this knight move freely because otherwise, in many different cases, this very weak point that black has on d6 could be lost immediately. You know that, remember? It's one of the weaknesses, maybe the only one right now, that we have to take advantage of. Remember, in any case, that we're down in exchange, so we must be super active with our pieces. And indeed, Kasparov understands this perfectly, because this game is impressive to study. At this point, as you can see, logically, being down in exchange, we must be extremely active, otherwise we'll end up in a lost endgame. H4, the bishop is threatened, and when it moves, he doesn't waste time castling, but continues improving his pieces and plays knight from c to b6, attacking the rook. Now, almost by force, right? Shirov places his rook on the 7th rank, on a2. You know that placing a rook on the 7th rank is usually extremely lethal. In the future, it can be opened, for example with f5, and connect the two rooks on this point. The queen could come in, right? And this can be extremely dangerous for white. Castling. The plan of, for example, queen e8, queen e6, and moving it, for example, to g6 is still good. However, logically, that would be admitting the mistake. And for us, chess players, it's a bit hard to admit that we've made a mistake. Rook d6 defended by the bishop attacking our queen seems much more human. Queen f3, queen a7. At the moment, they're not doing anything to us, so we can continue with our plans. And here, although it's not the best move, maybe the best move would be bishop b5, activating ourselves even more with all our pieces. However, Kasparov uses a move that seems very, very, very good. And this move is this one here, knight d7. Obviously, very, very strong things are starting to be threatened here. For example, let's suppose that white ignores everything, black, Shirov ignores everything and plays, for example, queen a2 and comes to attack. The idea is that this game would already be completely won for the white pieces. Besides the rook being captured, which wouldn't be the most important thing, the knights could also enter, knight e7, check, king h8, forced, probably the rook would now be taken for free, and not only that, but the queen would enter and would probably give mate on g8. Therefore, this would be a completely lost position for black. So you can't just ignore the threat. What would be the best move here for the black pieces? You might wonder that. Probably the best move is, this queen is on a7. The best move would be rook a8. Keep in the pressure, but this seems quite delicate, because it seems like you're taking all the pieces away from your king's defense, and the knights could enter with a lot of force. So, with a very normal looking criterion, Shirov played knight d8, giving up the rook, yes, but bringing a knight to the defense. Careful, he's given up the rook, but he's already up a rook. He's just giving back the extra material he has. Therefore, here Kasparov takes the rook, king takes f8, and although we are now equal in material, or rather than equal, we have the same material, but we have a passed pawn, so we are quite a bit better, we are going to try to win this game, and Kasparov doesn't let these games slip away. Probably many of you here are thinking, well, I see an extremely equal position here where I wouldn't know how to win either. Well, let's see how Kasparov does it, because that way we can pick up some ideas to apply ourselves later in our games. First of all, b5, which is a useful and beautiful move, right? It traps this knight again, which cannot come out in any case through c6. We don't want them to play knight c6, because then knight d4 would come, and they would be doing the same as us, placing a very strong knight. The game continues with queen a3. Shirov improves the queen and attacks this bishop with two pieces. What would you play next with white? Because it seems we should move the bishop immediately, but if we move the bishop, they trade queens. What do we do? Well, pay attention, because Kasparov told Shirov, take my bishop if you want, I'm playing queen f5. Obviously, this bishop can't be captured. Regardless of whether they take with the queen or the rook, we could follow up with queen d7, for example, threatening a knight that practically couldn't move, and if it did, it would be queen e7 and queen e8 checkmate. Therefore, this bishop can't be taken. So what does Shirov do? He moves the king to e8, which is a sound decision. However, now, since the bishop wasn't taken, I can move it away. This monster bishop, look at where it's pointing at f7. Now there are many discovered attacks, like knight c7 check, and then we can enter through here once we eliminate this knight, right? Obviously, we haven't lost the bishop. If our attack was strong with the bishop being offered, imagine if it's the same attack and we keep the bishop, right? So this already seems like a piece of cake for Kasparov. Not for us, though. Rook c2. Logically, they're threatening the bishop again. What is Kasparov to you? Well, he says, take it if you want. I'll play queen takes s7. Let's see what happens if he takes the bishop. It's very simple. If rook takes bishop, we would simply win the game like this. Queen g8 check, king d7, forced, and then we could follow with knight b6, check, and we would win back the rook. Honestly, there's nothing better for the black pieces than to make all these moves. So, what did they do here? They captured the bishop, the queen entered giving check on g8, king d7, and now knight b6, and we win back the rook. In this case, we'll have the exchange up again, right? Now, what does black do? Well, they have to move out a check, we take the rook, we attack the queen, which moves to c5, and we have to keep winning the game. Careful, it looks easy, but it's not. They're attacking the knight, and once again, Kasparov offers it up. Don't tell me Kasparov's reading isn't impressive. It's true, the queen is covering the a7 square, but if he decides to take this knight, the game would quickly end with rook a7, we'd take this knight with check, and this would be totally losing. That's why Shirov tries to resist with the move queen d4, while attacking this point, attacking the knight, and still defending, above all, the rook's entry on a7. Change a route, rook a3. Now the rook can pass through the third rank. The bishop comes to attack the rook on c1, and quickly, this move is impressive. Pay attention, because it will fascinate you. Knight e3. He gives away the rook. He gives away the pawn here now. Well, he's not given the pawn away, but this bishop could be exchanged for the knight, right? Let's speak properly. No pawn is being given away. But think about one thing. If the rook is taken, knight f5 wins the queen. Check and I take the queen. And if you capture my knight, then I would simply play rook takes e3, where I'd have an endgame with an extra pawn, the b5 pawn, and on top of that, it would be a passed pawn. And logically, I could even capture this point on g7 in most cases, and I'd have another passed pawn on the h-file. So here, the best continuation for black would logically be to capture this knight. Naturally, Shirov resigned here. Rook takes e3, and as you can see, it's impossible to stop. All these threats from the white pieces, especially since the extra pawn is a passed pawn and would be impossible to stop. For example, many of you might think, I'll come over here to stop it with the queen, but simply, I take this pawn here, as I was saying, and no matter how much you take this one, I'll end up promoting this h-pawn, which has no opposition. So that's how Kasparov did it to end up winning this game. What'd you think? An impressive game, right? You like me explaining? These types of games, this way we can draw many conclusions. I love it. So if you liked it, leave a big thumbs up. I'm leaving right down here in the description, both my book, and if you want to subscribe to the free newsletter, as well as if you want to access winning models training with a grandmaster, I'll leave it all down here in the description. Everything that's active, obviously the 30-day pack that you already sold out, I can't leave it because you sold it out right away, okay? All these things. For those who weren't fast enough, I'm very sorry, but it's no longer accessible. Yeah. I hope you loved this video. And as always, we'll see you tomorrow in the next one, friends. Bye.